Now,
Yeah.
welcome everyone. Thank you for joining in early. Those of you who have, we are still waiting for others to join, but I'm happy to kickstart our third webinar of the series, which is Customer Success Playbook for an Economic Crisis. Just a reminder, in case you have to drop out or you have been unable to join in time, we'll be sending a recording to everyone. So with that, we welcome our speaker for the day, James Scott. Thank you so much, James, for doing this on such short notice. People who don't know, James.
That's pretty normal right now. Everything's short notice right now. So it was my pleasure.
True that. So for people who don't know him, James is a seasoned customer success executive with a track record of serving high growth B2B SaaS companies. He's the VP Customer Success at ShootProof, where James focuses on delivering extraordinary customer experiences underpinned by world-class customer success, onboarding, and support organizations. James has been one of the top 100 customer success strategists, and he also authored the first ever customer success coaching program to gain international accreditation. Once again, welcome to the webinar, James. We also have a moderator, Puneet Kataria, founder and CEO of SuccessBox, and one of LinkedIn's top voices of 2019 for his thought leadership on customer success. I think everyone on the webinar already knows Puneet. I'm not going to go into his introduction again, but Puneet, James, over to you.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Awesome. And
just to let you know, people already, I think, know James. Jeremy is saying, I recognize James' voice. I'm taking that course right now.
Yeah, Jeremy, sorry about that. You know, I bumped into somebody at a meetup a few weeks back, and they're like, hey, I know your voice, but I usually listen to you on 1.5 speed. So you sound like higher pitched.
So how are you taking that one, James? Was that a compliment?
This is normal speed. Yeah, I know. I can take that different ways, but I'm fine with you speeding me up. That's cool. This is me at one time speed.
No, lovely. And Nilesh, welcome, James, and Nilesh. Thank you so much for enabling this, making this happen. And Nilesh is usually the man behind the scenes, making sure we all are able to actually get together. And so he's the key facilitator. Without him, nothing will move. So thanks. And as part of the next hour, he is going to help us watch chat, and so that we can keep the communication two-way. While we only have the familiar voice of James and me having the privilege to be doing most of the talking, and I'm honored to be having this conversation with James. Nilesh will sort of make sure that he is able to bring in all your comments and conversations and your points and your comments and questions in the mix. And so let's keep this two-way, and that way is we're all in a small virtual meetup of sorts. So cool. With that said, quickly talking about what the agenda is going to be today. So this is essentially this is part 3 of a 4-part series on customer success, especially in the lockdown scenario caused by COVID, in a potential economic crisis that is again caused by COVID and is very, very turbulent times. And nobody has been through this before. So it's so we believe that none of us have the perfect playbook, but I think we can all come together and bring in experts like James and all of you listening in, and maybe we can come out of this much more smarter and come out of this together and faster. Part 1, we've already covered customer success strategy. So where we spoke about building a lot of empathizing with the customer situation, not just understanding your own situation as a business, and doing business scenario modeling, of course, for your business, but also for your customer's business to understand what the customers are going through, and then building a strategy on top of it for managing customer success. Part 2 was getting into the next level of detail, which was all around retention tools and strategies. So primarily, we spoke about customer retention, and there we got into each and every tool that we potentially have in our back pockets, primary things like discounting, things like offering any additional professional services, offering any upgrades for a lower price or for pre-price, for a lifelong or for short term, all of that stuff. So we covered, I think, roughly about 10 or 11 such tools. If you've not checked that out, I think it'd be very interesting for you to take a deep dive into our part 2. So both part 1 and part 2. And today, this webinar is primarily focused on playbooks. In part 2 also, we spoke a lot about playbooks, but we were able to sort of zoom into those retention tools. Today, as in terms of the agenda, so we'll sort of continue to build on what we have already covered. And so we're going to use James' experience and knowledge and his expertise and discuss on customer success playbook. Now we've got all these tools, but how do we put all of this together in a playbook which you can go and apply, which can start from, okay, who's gonna manage which accounts, how many hands do we need on deck, how should we be measuring success in these times, measuring our own success in these times, what should be those KPIs, and getting into do we need to revisit our org structure, who's going to handle what, how do we segment accounts. So revisiting a lot of potentially the basics, but especially reanalyzing them or looking at them again from the times that we live in today, and then figuring out what potentially are the best playbooks that we can have, or rather what is the best approach to put together a playbook that we can set up. So with that sort of set, and by the way, we will also get into, time permitting, and very likely we will also get into communication aspects as to what is the best mode of, what is not just the best mode, what is the best way of communicating today when your customers are also going through a tough time. How do you ask for a renewal, for example, which can be very sensitive communication, but also an important one for both sides. But we still want to be empathetic and be human about it, and be sensitive to the situation on both sides. So with sort of a lot to cover. It doesn't even feel like we've already spent 2 hours talking about it in part 1 and part 2 of the webinar. There's already so much to be covered in this one. So with that said, welcome, James, and thank you for doing this. So let me start with the first question. So while we are setting up a playbook for customer success in these times, how do we measure the success of a playbook? In fact, the measure of the success of a playbook itself will be measured by the success of the goals of customer success organization or the customer success team. So what should be the KPIs of a customer success team in these times? Should we continue using the same KPIs that we were using, or should we actually revisit the entire KPIs? And we are talking about our own KPIs as customer success team members.
Right.
And the entire team,
Yeah, absolutely. Where I want to start is just reminding everyone that this is actually a time where customer success has kind of risen into the spotlight in many organizations. And it's maybe frustratingly the first time that you've really had that feeling potentially within your organization. But a lot of smart companies now are focusing on customers and retaining the customer logos and the revenue that they already have within their customer base, rather than over-investing in acquisition right now, because acquisition is hard. You know that probably from your personal experience, both at work and also outside of work, that people are being very cautious about spending money, particularly new money, on things that they didn't have before. So in many ways, this is kind of our moment, right, to shine as a customer success community. It's our moment to really demonstrate the value that we can provide to an organization. So that's kind of the macro context, right? Then you think about, well, how do we demonstrate that value, and how do we measure that value? And I think I think really it is a case of staying true to course, right? Staying true to the things that we should have been doing all along when it comes to thinking of understanding customers, when it comes to delivering value to customers, and when it comes to how we measure that value through KPIs so that we can demonstrate it back within our organizations. In the same way that we spend a lot of our time demonstrating value to our customers, it's a really important part of a customer success manager or customer success leader's responsibilities to actually be able to effectively demonstrate value back within their organization as well. So, you know, what are those metrics? Well, things like retention and upsell and NPS, you know, those are the ones that tend to usually be the ones that are, you know, are the key performance indicators for success. Retention, because obviously if customers are finding value, they'll stay with you for longer. Upsell, if they are getting value, then they're more likely to want to spend more money with you in the future. And NPS, or net promoter score, because they're more likely to, if they're getting value, they're more likely to tell others about that value. I think all those metrics are, like, now's not the time to say, oh, all my metrics that I was telling you were important are now not important. I think they're more important than ever. And it's our job to help the rest of our organizations really understand why those metrics are important. And people are going to be looking at them now more than they probably ever have before. That's certainly been my experience, you know, over the last few weeks within ShootProof. So assuming you always had some part of your incentive, or one of the key metrics for you was retention, then keep doing it. You know, don't change anything. Retention is still a key metric, and it's more important than ever before. Upsell is a different one, right? Upsell is probably less likely to happen right now. Absolutely. Does that mean it's not a good metric? No, it doesn't. It is still a good metric. It's just the target for that metric might need to be adjusted, right? So I think that's my kind of overall message, is to stay true to your customer success principles and know your metrics well, keep consistent with those metrics that you're measuring, but have a conversation about the targets and what is reasonable in terms of what you can expect from each of those metrics, you know, in the short term, the midterm, and then the long term, as hopefully we recover and come out of this current situation. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. No, thank you. And I think I think these are very, very, very fundamentally very strong statements that you've made. And I think retention is what the core job of customer success teams and customer success has always been, and those are something that we absolutely want to be continuing on. However, I do personally feel that so first of all, no customer success team runs only on one KPI or one metric. It's usually a set. It could be, you know, logo retention. It could be you know, seat count if you're in the business where it's sort of measured by seat count or API consumption or whatever that unit or the build unit is that you do. But logo retention, user or whatever that build unit is, retention. And then we've got MRR retention, which has been, which is usually what the business world understands, because everything then should roll up to this. And then upsell, of course, can be treated independently or part of the MRR retention itself. And I'll come to NPS in a minute. So all these metrics, I think one interesting thing that I'm seeing is, or at least what I would like to chime in here and say is, I think it makes sense to prioritize, or at least define the priority of each of those metrics. Not all those metrics in these times, I think they never carry the same weightage any point in time, because the priority of each metric will sort of define the core focus of your organization. If you put upsell right on the top, it speaks volumes of what you are expected to do, what the product management is expected to do, what the engineering is expected to do, what the marketing is expected to do. So it sort of speaks of volumes of, you know, the entire focus of the organization. And I think right now, given the times, I personally feel the logo retention, if there is one metric that needs to jump right on top, it has to be logo retention. Seats is something that you may or may not be able to control. I think COVID, we all know it's pretty, the situation is tough. But one thing which is absolutely true, I know this is a shitty situation to be in, but this is a temporary situation. That basically means as long as we can retain a relationship, we can retain the logos, there will be times where we will be able to, make revenue from them. So if at all you have to sort of choose between multiple matrices, I feel, spend some time.
Absolutely. I fully agree with that. I think logo retention means that you're still preserving the relationship and the connection with that company. And, you can always, it's a lot easier to go back and bring back the revenue later on if you still have that open relationship. You're still connected as a customer rather than having to go and reacquire them in the future. I'll give you an example. At ShootProof, we have a number of different paid plans, and we also have a free plan, which is quite restricted in terms of functionality. But we have prioritized helping customers who are trying to reduce cost right now. We prioritized educating them and helping them move to the free plan rather than just closing their account. Right. So we've retained the logo, we've lost the revenue for hopefully only a finite period of time. But they are still, they're still a customer. They're just on a free plan right now. And it's not so much the metrics that we're worried about. It's just we want to keep them in our customer community and keep talking to them and keep that dialogue open, and they can still use our product, albeit some, in a reduced scope. But when their business recovers, we'll still be there for them, and they'll still be there in our portfolio, and we'll hopefully be able to reactivate them more easily than if we had just let them close their account and disappear, potentially.
And just to understand that example clearly, so you were able to, so they moved from a paid plan to a free plan, or did you extend the continued the same plan without a fee temporarily?
That's a great question, and that's been a big discussion topic, right? So what we have done is keep all our plans the same, but we've always had a free plan, but we have seen an increase in people wanting to reduce monthly spend. So we have helped raise awareness of the free plan as an option, and it's kind of good for them because they don't, even though they may not be using the software much, they're hoping, of course, their business will come back in a few months, and they don't have to reconfigure their account again and set up their branding and to get all the settings back to how they were. So their account effectively can just sit there. It can be dormant if they don't want to use it, or they can use it in a reduced way for a period of time. And then when they're ready to kind of ramp things back up, it's super easy. It's just, a couple of clicks of the button and they're back where they were. So we didn't, but we've definitely I've seen other companies offer free, a period of time, either free or discounted plans to customers. And we thought long and hard about that. And what we settled on actually was to take, like every customer, remember every customer has their own story. Every customer has their own unique circumstances. And what we decided was to, instead of kind of just pushing out free stuff to every single customer, we waited for the customers to come to us. We said, listen, if you're experiencing financial hardship, if you're experiencing challenges right now, speak to us, right? We encouraged that conversation. And then in that conversation, we asked questions. We learned about specifically how this crisis was affecting their business. And then we offered a solution that was more tailored to their specific situation. Now, often that was a month free or, a couple of months free, but not always. We found, interestingly, a lot of customers who just needed other things from us, and we were able to offer those. And in the process of doing all of this, we learned a lot about our customers and how they're feeling and how they perceive the impact on the industry. And that's helped us just more generally to inform things like our education initiatives and what webinars are we going to run, You know, what guest speakers can we invite in to talk on a specific topic that we know is in top of mind for people. So, you know, we've connected with customers in very personal ways and learned stuff about them that probably we never would have learned had it not been for this unfortunate situation that we're in now.
I think spot on. So this is something that we've been speaking about, that while you're building the playbook, while you're figuring out, you know, how do all the retention tools that you've got, you know, what all can you do for your customer in these times, you never want to, you never want to finalize that in a silo. You obviously want to be with those customers, even if you've got a large volume of customers, and you probably cannot do that one-to-one with all of them, but pick a sample size of 10, 20, you know, whatever makes sense in your business scenario, and to validate that this is the, you know, these are the things that you can potentially do, ABCD, but do it absolutely in collaboration with them. And that way is, you know, give them a seat on the table, at least to a sample size before you finalize and say, okay, you know, proposal 1, 2, or 3, or option 1, 2, or 3, you know, for us, for both of you, the customers as well as the business, to go through this together. Yeah.
Totally. You know, we've talked, sorry, just to close out on that, we've talked, you know, as an industry for, you know, in recent years, a lot about humanizing the relationships we have with customers, you know, and not treating them like a number on a spreadsheet, and connecting with the individual people at the end, you know, the end users who are actually interacting with our products. And I'll tell you what, it's been a fantastic, choose my words differently. Fantastic is maybe, it has been an opportunity to do that at a level that I have never actually personally even done in my career before, right? Where we've actually had these conversations and offered something to a customer that feels kind of small and inconsequential, and we don't really feel like we're doing enough. But they've written back and said, you know, I've got tears in my eyes. This means I can, you know, pay for my daughter's education this month, or things like that, like really human stories. And you realize that everyone has different needs, and everyone's in a different situation right now, and there is no one size fits all approach. And the best thing we can do is be curious, right? Which is one of those key competencies of a good customer success manager, is to always be curious, ask questions, and really get to understand customers so that we can help them, tailor help to them that's really impactful.
Got it. No, lovely. Thank you. And so while we are on the KPIs, and I think, and you spoke briefly about maybe the KPIs will be the same, but we need to absolutely need to go ahead and reset the targets. So what do you think are, how will one decide what should be those go-to goals? Do we even need goals, or should we just leave it open? You know, everybody is fetching. I personally feel there should always be targets. You know, that sort of makes you think that, okay, what is a realistic target? You know, and you start with some hypotheses at least, and then which is always based on some logic. So, but what's your take on it?
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I can't quite imagine a conversation with you know, my CEO where I said, you know what, I recommend taking away all targets right now. I mean, it's like, should there be a target? Yes, there absolutely should be targets. And I think if you were to recommend removing them, you're probably doing yourself a disservice, because again, we've been talking all this time about how important customer success is, and these KPIs that we should all get really understand and be able to, you know, be able to articulate and be able to track and hit. And then just to say, but, you know, it doesn't really matter how we do against those KPIs, it doesn't make sense. So I think there has to be targets. It's more important than ever before, probably. Now, does that mean targets shouldn't change? No, absolutely. It does not mean they shouldn't change. Targets will need to be adapted right now. We are in an unprecedented situation. We need to adjust. We need to adjust targets. Now, doesn't mean we'll get it right. It doesn't mean we're gonna, you know, we're in this kind of, we're all in this experience vacuum right now. We're all kind of learning this together. There is no playbook for how to handle a global pandemic, right? In customer success, there's barely any customer success playbooks. You know, the industry is so nascent. So we are working this out as we go along. And I think it's fine to acknowledge that and say, listen, let's have a conversation today as a customer success organization based on what we know from historical experience with our customers, based on some of the conversations we've had in recent days and weeks with our customers. And let's reset our expectations for a month from now, 3 months from now, 6 months, 12 months, right? Let's be realistic. Let's set targets that we feel are attainable, but also realistic based on the world we are now in.
Yep.
Now, this is something we did at ShootProof. We did this in March. We went back through, we looked at our budget for the rest of the year, and we made some assumptions about what Q2, Q3, Q4 would look like. Now, here we are a month later, and now we're going back in and we're looking at those assumptions, and we're seeing how well we did, right? Not just how our actual numbers were, but how do we feel now about our forecasts for the rest of the year? Because we have a month's worth of data that we didn't have a month ago. Like a month ago, we had a couple of weeks of data and it was virtually useless. Now we have 6 weeks worth of data, and we can really start to better understand what's going on, how our customers are reacting, and make more informed, hopefully more accurate forecasts for the rest of the year. So I think we do need to adjust targets, but I think we also need flexibility from leadership to recognize that this is unprecedented. We're going to learn some stuff every week, and it's fine to go back and look at those targets again periodically going forwards to make sure they still feel like they're the right ones.
Yeah, I think you're sort of spot on. So I've been speaking to a lot of founders, and there's always this for any businesses, every year, every quarter, every month. I think there is always a growth target, and that is what you typically chase. So you've got an MRR or ARR, and you basically want to month on month, quarter on quarter, year on year, grow on it. The gold standard today with the COVID, what I've been hearing from the street is that maintaining the same ARR that you entered the year with and maintaining that today is the gold standard, apparently. But of course, for a lot of, I think for a lot of us, this is obviously a very, very generic statement, but very specifically, you obviously want to be absolutely taking into consideration which industries are you serving in. So, for example, if somebody's serving hospitality, I think that's right. That's a very, very tough spot to be in. If you were serving airlines, these are, the truth is, as long as you can just maintain the relationship and hopefully come out on the other end, still having a customer and you still being relevant, I think that is absolutely the key. So yeah, but the gold standard today is zero growth.
Yeah, and just on that, I've heard also that 100% kind of net retention being a gold standard. I'm not a big fan of like these generalizations across a whole industry. It's like saying, what is the right CSM to revenue ratio, or is it 2 million per CSM? Is it 1? It's like, it depends. You need to understand your organization and your customer base and the customer experience you're trying to generate, and you need to design the model that's right for your business. So if you're already have a net retention that's less than 100%, well, you're probably not going to, 100% is probably unachievable. It's going to be a lot lower than 100%, like during this period, right? If it's normally 150%, then maybe 100% is undershooting. Like maybe you should be aiming for 120%. There is no, I think it's easy to say, listen, when I come out of this, it'd be nice if I was just where I was when I came into it. That's kind of a nice simplistic way of kind of I guess erasing the memory of this whole unfortunate time. But listen, to your point, Puneet, I think it varies per company, and even within your company, within your customer base, if you serve different industries, right? You might want to think about segmenting your customers into kind of high impact, medium impact, low impact segments, right? Because if you got software, event software, and you have, well, maybe that's a bad example, because that would be an example where probably all industries are impacted. But you say some software sales management tool,
Let's
right?
say CRM.
Yeah, and some of your customers are in the, you've got a major, like 30% of your revenue is in the airline industry, and 30% is in events, and 30% is on online education industry vertical, right? It's good to acknowledge that the impact on these different industries could be very different, and you might have a net retention target per segment rather than just a, kind of a general number that you're aiming for. So I think work out what your gold standard is for your company, and work as hard as you can to achieve that. Don't worry so much about other people's gold standard. Find the standard that's right for you, and that becomes your target for this period.
No, spot on. I 100% agree, James, with that. It always depends, and I think understanding your customer base, understanding your situation, and more you spend time in understanding that, more, I think, more logical, more relevant those goals, and more achievable those goals will be for everyone. Absolutely. So moving on and continue to build on it. So we've got KPIs. We've spoken about targets and how we want to figure out our own gold standards.
Just gonna interrupt you here. So we have a couple of interesting points from the audience. Nimesh is saying, how about making advocacy an integral part of the team's KPIs, not just NPS, but measuring case studies, webinars, referrals, guest blogs, because none of that will happen if you haven't delivered the value.
Yeah. Yes. That is a good idea. I think when we talk about metrics, we generally think about leading and lagging metrics. So the metrics that I've been talking about so far are lagging metrics. They're kind of the most important things, and they are most closely related to the business outcomes, but they take longer to influence, right? They're big metrics. Leading metrics could be things like, how many customers am I connecting with per week? How many business reviews am I doing? How many case studies have I got approval for? Things like that. They're leading metrics, which means that they on their own are not ultimately, they are correlated with business success. So, some customer success teams will measure their CSMs on lagging metrics. Some will measure them on leading, and there's pros and cons of both. So I think yes, if you have a team that is already measured on metrics such as that, then they're good ones to continue to focus on. We're certainly finding with our customers at ShootProof that they're not very busy right now. Our customers are photographers, so they are taking pictures of weddings, family portraits, events, conferences, right? So they've been pretty dramatically affected. So what we're trying to do now is, we're recognizing they've got time. So, for them, actually participating in like community events or sharing their story with other photographers is actually something that they're willing to do. However, I could imagine another scenario where a customer may be it may be a bit tone deaf to ask a customer for a case study. If they're if they're really challenged right now, they're really suffering, and they feel like that's the last thing they want to spend time on. So I think it's all about being compassionate, being empathetic, thinking through what it would feel like from the customer's perspective if you were asking them for case studies or video testimonials or to collaborate on a blog, and make sure you're taking that customer-centric view. And if you put yourself in their shoes and you can imagine what it would feel like if somebody was asking you to do that right now and it feels fine, by all means go ahead and do it. But if you feel like, oh, that feels a little bit dirty, it's a little bit yucky, I wouldn't really like it if someone did it to me, don't do it, because any bad sort of impact it would have had prior to COVID-19, that's like amplified 100-fold right now, right? So if you get it wrong now, it really feels bad from a customer's perspective. So
yeah,
just tread cautiously.
No, I think I love the way you put it, James, that everything because of COVID is getting 100 times amplified. It's also true for all the good and all the value that we are delivering today. And I think everybody who can step up today, I think that also will be not just of course amplified, but will also be remembered for the months and quarters and years to come. And I think that's going to permanently build a stronger bond of partnership between you and your customers for times to come. But I love the way you put it. Yes, it's absolutely everything. COVID is everybody is at the edge of their anxiety, emotions, all of that stuff, which is just human for us to amplify that. That's a very, very good point. And like you're making me think a lot of our own customer success pieces. But thank you, great points and good question, Nilesh. Nilesh,
there's one more quick question from Patty. Do you think free versions of products are a necessity in this new world? Like keeping customers in the fold and comfortable with based on what the level of commitment is?
Yeah, it's wow, that's a great question. So if you don't have a free version right now, is it worth thinking about one? If you're like a multi-$100,000 enterprise product, probably not, right? But I can tell you, with our product, which is a relatively low ACV, it's or low ARPU, it's from $10 to $60 a month. A free plan has been invaluable for us. Whether that's a great use of product, if you've already got one, I would say leverage it as best you can. Whether it makes sense to kind of build a free plan right now, that's a harder decision because that would obviously take investment and work. But I think it's it's an option that prevents churn, right? So if you can get there relatively easily, it could be positive. I mean, the danger of the sort of flip side of this is, and totally unconnected with software, but my wife's business is she's a yoga therapist. She's a small business owner. She does yoga therapy for clients. All the big yoga studios right now have suddenly started offering free yoga online, right? And so her challenge is that now something that people were prepared to pay for has suddenly been offered for free by bigger companies. And it's kind of taken away the value perception of the product, right? The product is worth money, but now it's seen as zero or a low value product by customers that she's trying to sell to. So I would think about, like, if you do have a free plan, I think it's worth thinking about what the scope of your free plan is and how you make sure that there is a real incentive to move back to a paid plan, right? There's a differentiation in value between free and paid.
Right, and I personally think so. First of all, I think where your product engineering resources should be put in, assuming, and Patty, I'm assuming your question was, should there be effort put into coming out with a free plan? We've spoken about this in some of the past conversations as well. I think what is more interesting is understanding and empathizing with your customer situation, figuring out what you can do through your technology, through your product that will keep you more relevant in the times today. And if you are like a few inches away or a few feet away from being more relevant, I think steering your efforts and energies to being more relevant, I think is sort of the right move. Now, how do you distribute that? How do you sort of deliver that additional value? Is it going to be free? Is it going to be paid? Is it going to be forever free? Is it going to be paid from day zero, or is it going to be temporarily free? And those are some of the more creative ways of I think thinking about it. For example, a lot of co-working spaces have been either temporarily extremely reduced prices, or I don't think they're free yet, but majority of them are temporarily reduced price. And as consumers, everybody understands that, yes, the usage is low at this point in time, and it's only a temporary measure, which will help them also get through it. As long as you're communicating it clearly, I think you are able to deliver, or at least talk about the value. And I'm sure, I think, James, it's a very, very legit point that you're talking about of the yoga studios, because gyms are also extremely affected with this lockdown, because we are all trying to stay away from crowds, and gyms are typically social clubs by the nature of communities. And they're all, I think, trying to keep the communities together, still trying to be relevant in today's times. And I think all of them then absolutely hope that majority of us, well, it never is majority, but especially when it comes to gyms, but a lot of us will hopefully, switch to a paid membership. And this is an opportunity for them maybe to just reach out, say thank you, and continue to be more relevant, and also hopefully acquire more customers for the future.
Yeah. And it kind of ties together, the stuff we talked about around upsell as well. And I know there's a lot of kind of concern around whether you should talk to customers about upsell now and renewals as well. But, I think if you remember the core principles of customer success, right, is to help customers extract as much value out of the products they've already purchased as possible, number one. And then number two is look for ways to provide them extra value on top of that by adopting other products or enhanced functionality, i.e. upsell. So, now I've spoken to a lot of companies that are unlocking premium features in their product and making them free for this period, right? So you've got what the customer's paying for, but there's maybe a higher tier plan that's got more features, more value that the customer could unlock. They're offering that for a period of time for free. So it's kind of a win-win-win, right? It gives more value to the customer to help them through this period. And it creates a ton of goodwill from the company to the customer, from the customer's perspective. And then, hopefully 3 months down the line or 6 months down the line, whenever it is, they've got used to using those features. And now when you're having a discussion around, well, actually, as usually this is X amount per month. We gave it to you for free for 3 months to help you through that period. They're like, well, yeah, thank you for that. It really helped me. And I can see the value because I've been using it. And it was super nice of you to do that. So that upsell hopefully will become a very easy conversation 3 months later, or whatever period of time later.
Oh, absolutely. I think great example there. So coming back to our core playbook pieces, sorry, I have to get the door. That was my daughter. Okay. Yeah. Back to the topic. So one of the things that we've been thinking about is how can we amplify the playbook? A lot of these requires one-to-one touch points. A lot of these require a lot more communication, a lot more engagement with the customers in times versus the normal times today. So do you think we can somehow get more bandwidth from the functions which are not, which have some spare bandwidths today, acquisition being one of them? For example, sales sort of comes to mind, comes to top of mind. Even marketing can help you reach out to your, go one to many in terms of messaging to your customer base. And the third, but not the least, is how can you leverage your CEOs, your CXOs, the entire management to actually participate in this a lot more, because whenever the CXOs will come in, they'll absolutely be more effective, but you only get so much bandwidth from them. So essentially, should we temporarily restructure the org? Move people from one function to another? In fact, it just so happened today I got actually a call from my banker asking for feedback, and I'm speaking to somebody from the bank, and I realized this person was originally supposed to be doing acquisition, and now she was essentially trying to get some feedback and trying to check out if there are any specific concerns around this area. So that was a great example there. But what's your view, and which functions make sense? And specifically,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I think it makes sense. I think it makes sense to temporarily give, whether it's, you know, a different set of responsibilities to people on the team. I mean, that's always an option, right? Your company is just, you have a strategy and you have a plan to execute against that strategy, and then you have a set of individuals with certain skills who execute that plan. So, you know, first up, you need a strategy, right? What is the purpose of this, you know, what are you trying to achieve by reassigning roles? Or like, what is the information? You're trying to learn more about your customers. You're trying to get upsells. You're trying to handle, you know, an increased support load. What is the high level reason? What is the why? Then you can form the plan, right? Which is, okay, how are we going to do this? Are we going to do it by making phone calls? And, you know, we're going to do it by sharing this information with them, or so you're going to have a series of steps that are part of a plan. And then you can bring in the sales team or the SDRs or whoever and train them on the plan and, you know, and execute against it. But that's absolutely fine. You know, what I advise being cautious against doing is just kind of knee-jerk reactions, you know, oh, could you help me with these calls because, you know, I haven't got enough bandwidth. Well, you know, as you know, if you put somebody, for example, on a sales team in touch with a customer and they've not spoken to them before and they don't understand that customer, and they come in and say the wrong thing or push for an upsell that isn't there, you know, that's a great example of that bad experience we were talking about earlier, which can then take one poor experience can undo a bunch of good experiences that happened prior to it. And then it takes another bunch of good experiences afterwards to repair the damage, right? So as a customer success manager or as a customer success leader, you own the customer, right? That is your responsibility. So you need to come up with a strategy and the plan, and then, yes, embrace any spare resources around the organization to help execute that. So for example, sales and SDRs, you know, it's a great, I mentioned earlier, being curious. It's a great time just to ring up and check in on customers, as it sounds like your banker did for you, right? They shouldn't feel like you've got an ulterior motive, right? That you're just there to try and sell them something, or it needs to be really clear that you're ringing up to, you know, hey, we're just checking in, right? We know our customers are suffering right now, and we wanted just to learn more about how this is impacting you. You know, is there anything we're doing that's been helpful? Is there anything we're not doing that would be helpful? What are you hearing? What are you expecting? Just lots of open questions. Just that personal contact will make a difference if it's done right. It'll make a positive difference. Plus, you've got all that intelligence then that you can feed back into the business. It's important that that intelligence doesn't just sit in a CRM note, you know, that no one ever reads. You know, find ways to consolidate and filter out the signals amongst all the noise and feed that back into the business, because maybe that helps you make a decision about a new pricing plan, or maybe it helps you, as I said earlier, decide on some content that you want to build to help them. So I think that getting more touch points with customers, but done in the right way, is definitely a good way to utilize an under capacity or an underutilized sales organization. As for executives and exec sponsors, you know, it's a great time for thought leadership. It's a great, you know, one of the things that customer success, one of the things that is always very popular in business reviews and things like that is where you do benchmarking, or you share knowledge of what you see happening across the industry, because every customer is wondering whether they're the only one feeling it this bad, or they're the only one worried about the future. So I think that's a great use for executives, you know, maybe could be webinars, could be blog written content. It could even just be virtual meetup, right? We've started doing a weekly customer meetup where we just kick off a Zoom call once a week, and customers can just come and chat. And sometimes, you know, we pick a topic or two, but it's very informal. And it's just having, again, it's just another way to get human connection. in a way that's pretty low effort from our part in terms of preparation and planning. So having your CEO join that call, or your head of product talk about what they're hearing, and test a few hypotheses on the group. I'd encourage you to make those opportunities available to customers, and customers will then decide whether it's of value to them. But it's better to do it that way than to not do anything.
Yep.
So, and then
Got
I
it.
think lastly, the other one I was thinking about was the marketing team, and obviously content production is key right now. So we for example put out a blog post all about the US stimulus package, the CARES Act as it's called, and a guide of how photographers can use can get funds from that stimulus fund. And that's been like our top content piece, for a long time, right? And a lot of people who aren't even customers are using that content and relying on it. So, and that was our marketing team, sort of thinking about how do we help our current customers. Let's not worry about acquisition right now. Let's think about retention and helping customers be good at running their business, but also help them discover new features and functionality that will be interesting and useful to them.
Oh, lovely point. And so, Nilesh, I see some comments coming in. If you want to share those, feel free. If you.
Yeah, sure. So there are a couple of questions. One is around communication, which I think we'll take it at the end. The second one is quite interesting. It's from Ellie, and she's asking, what if? So they are being asked to hit higher and higher metrics, while clients are needing more and more discounts. What's the best way to communicate to management what CS is facing right now?
Yeah, that's a very interesting.
Being asked to hit higher numbers by your leadership team, and then customers are telling you that, they're actually looking for discounts. Interesting. Yeah. That's a tricky place to be. And my standard answer to this question about how do you help others in the organization better understand the customer and the challenges, or the way that you're working with customers, which is I always take a two-pronged approach. Like data and customer testimonials, customer quotes. Why data is important is because I think as a customer success discipline, we've been relatively, we're still getting our arms around data and metrics. And as a result, a lot of the conversation we have internally around what we think, how customers are feeling, they're feeling stressed, they don't think it's worth it. They want a discount. They think we're being too slow. Whatever the feeling is, we relay that. And now that definitely is important, but a lot of the higher you go in an organization, the more you're driven by metrics, right? The more you spend, more of your life, unfortunately, you spend looking at spreadsheets and KPIs and things like that. So you've got to speak the language of your leadership. So data is key, right? Thinking of things that you can measure that illustrate why a certain strategy isn't working, or what customers are telling you, right? Hey, I did 20 calls, and of those 20 calls, 18 of those calls had a negative reaction to this thing that I said, right? And of those, they accounted for this much of revenue, and et cetera, et cetera. So you start to track and use data to form the argument as to why you think something should change. And then you bring in the emotional piece, the customer feelings, to kind of put flesh on the bones, to give them an emotional connection to data, because data on its own is also has its flaws, right? It's very black and white. It's very easy to forget that there's a human being at the end of the table. So you can say, listen, 18 out of 20 of these conversations I've had have gone negatively. And in fact, here are 2 quotes. These are verbatim quotes from 2 of those 18 customers, where they said, how disappointed they were in us, that we would suggest that thing to them, for example. So you've got a combination of data and that emotional kind of validation from a customer's own mouth. So it's no longer your words. It's not like what I think. What I think is not important. I'm just sharing with you what the data says and what the customer says, right?
Right.
You can form your own conclusions from that.
Okay, James, Nilesh, pardon me. I've been jumping on the top of my seat, and I'll be very direct here, guys. I think my best answer here. So there are two parts to any playbook: figuring out the playbook and then scaling the playbook or rolling out the playbook at a large scale. Whether it's leadership or whoever has a certain expectation, I think the first. Yeah, and those you believe are unrealistic to achieve, you can try a couple of times, few times, and you're seeing that it's not working. I will invite the leader and say, hey, can you show me how it's supposed to be done? Pick up the phone and then do it. And then I will go ahead and scale that playbook. And I think this is where the leadership is also tested, and the leadership needs to, step up and show, okay, these are tough times and this is the right conversation to have. And we've all been in tough situations. And I think there is, overall, when everybody is in this COVID situation, it is a difficult time, and there may, nobody can, either we all win together or we all lose together. It'll never be the case that, you will be able to, any one of us will be able to, one side will be able to extract more discount or the other side will be able to extract more renewal. It has to be, the right balance, which is dictated by the situation that your customer is in, which is also dictated by the situation that you are in, depending on what is the position of your organization. Is there a freemium plan? And all of those variables brought in. I think, so forming playbooks has two pieces, and I just want to stress on that. Figuring out the right playbook, and that's where we are doing enough sampling and let the leaders show it to you. And once we've figured it out, and you probably want to try a few things, and then you will say, that's not working. This is unrealistic. This seems to be the right balance. This is as far as we can push it, or this sounds fair. And then you go ahead and roll it out with the rest of the larger, whether it's a temporarily scaled team. And I don't know, some people have been very, I've heard not very comfortable with, and James, like you rightly cautioned, I think, you don't want a sales guy to be, speaking something which is not, because this individual is not used to speaking, being empathetic to customers as the years of training will go. But as long as we have our playbook well tested and polished, I think everybody in the organization can be trained to deliver repeatable results there. So yeah, sorry, I just couldn't hold it there.
Yeah, no, go. You get it out for me. That's fine. I was just kind of wrap up because I know we're almost at time. But just saying that, this is the time to be vulnerable as well. It's like I know we've talked about that again in customer success for a couple of years now, but again, as much as we're trying to understand the human being at the other end of the phone, we're also a human being. So it's like, hey, listen, I feel really awkward making this call to you today. I know that you're probably, suffering and there's a lot of uncertainty and XYZ, but I also know that your contract is coming up for renewal and we need to work out the best way to handle that given the situation we're in. This is what I'm thinking based on my best understanding of your situation, but I'm also worried that I may have misunderstood this or I might be wrong, So being vulnerable to your customers, I think, goes a long way because we are all human beings just trying to make the best of a crappy situation. And so, I think as long as you have that, open that door to vulnerability and recognize that, hey, I'm a human being too, and I'm doing my best, then you're more likely to find a good path forward in collaboration with the customer.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great way to communicate and open that conversation, being empathetic and also, calling it out that, hey, this is a situation that we need to figure out how do we handle your contract, and we want you to be obviously continue getting the value from the product. So, Nilesh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You're the one who's connecting us with everyone. Please go ahead.
Not a problem. So I think with the whole thing about, how do you get your management to be on board? There are a couple of very interesting points from the audience. One of which is get your management on a couple of customer calls. Get them to hear it live from the horse's mouth.
Yep.
And that might sort a lot of issues out for you.
Yeah, and if you have, and if you can jump on a few calls and take permission for your customers to even record some of those conversations, I think that recording can also be sort of helpful, because sometimes these timings can be difficult to handle, and recording is something that, like, we are recording this webinar, and you can probably, you know, take pieces of it and distribute it to whoever you think can get value from this. And similarly, I think those conversations, that recording can also be a good tactic, at least as a sampling. So Nilesh, you said a couple of points. Is there something else as well?
No, I think there are a couple of points around communication. I think you are going to cover this in the next section. I think let's wrap it up with communication.
Yeah, I think we're already on the communication. So how is this communication, you know, different than the normal? How do we, you know, I think you've already given some examples of how can we maintain empathy while bringing up the topic or the reason why we are actually calling, whether it's renewal or whether the contract, you know, whatever that conversation is supposed to be. So any more examples, James, that you can probably share? I'm personally loving them, by the way. I
don't think so. I mean, I think empathy is really key. You know, we're still trying to do the same job. We're just recognizing that we're, you know, the better we understand customers. I mean, again, empathy. It's not like something you should start doing now that you haven't been doing before. It's like a core component of customer success is empathy. So hopefully you're already empathetic, and you just maybe need to turn the dial up a little bit, because you know, more people are going to need it than usual. But you know, just lots of active listening, right? Active listening is asking open questions. It's your body language, is which, you know, webcams turned on, right?
Yeah.
Looking people in the eye. I put on a you know, virtual background here just for fun today, but you know, it's fine to show people your house and your messy bedroom, or your, you know, your whatever it is. It's like that, again, it's that human connection is important. And I know there's a lot of, you know, it's tiring as well, being, you know, there's a lot of face-to-face conversations happening that haven't been happening with a lot of companies. So being on Zoom all day long is also tiring. So, you know, you can acknowledge that, like, just with customers, because they're probably feeling the same. And again, just showing that you're human and you're just like them, right? It just helps. So no more specific examples. I would just say, you know, just remember that customer success has a big part of empathy in it. And that's something that is super important right now.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great ending. And I'll just only add one more point. I think lots of times we try to build these human relationships, and you know, some of the common situations, common interests sort of enable that outside of the business conversations. While we may not have a common sport, and hence you may not be in a position to, you know, have that conversation. But I think the situation that we are in, the anxieties that we are all going together through this, when this is going to be over, and we all hope that we're going to come out of it, I think gives a I think it's a very very real scenario, and having a you know, keeping a 5-minute, 10-minute out of the 30-minute agenda just to have that human element there is I think it's not just an opportunity or an option. I think it's sort of is the bare minimum that you should you know, sort of discuss.
Yeah, just
at least even I
just a reminder. So ShootProof, our logo, our company tagline is focus on what matters most. And I tell you, this is resonating more than ever before right now with customers. You know,
I love that.
Just remembering, like, we're all in this together, and you know, focus on family, focus on, you know, just that human connection. You know, the rest of it will work itself out if we remember, you know, what's important to us. So I'll leave you with that inspirational thought, which is not certainly not of my making.
No, great. I think, Nilesh, unless there are any questions, we have 5 minutes over.
Yeah, let's take just one last one from Caro. So he says he's the only customer success guy at the company. And
oh, great job holding the fort.
They are in a positively impacted situation. They're growing very fast. But at the same time, they can't hire anymore. So how does he personalize communication in such a scenario where the number of customers are too large to handle? Because he does want to personalize, because that's how you get the proper customer experience. At the same time, he obviously cannot, let's say, do it for hundreds of customers.
Yeah, it's tricky. So we're in a similar situation. We have tens of thousands of customers, and a CS team of 4 people. So we don't have one-to-one conversations unless they reach out to us, to our support team, which is a different team. So what we're doing is we're using data. So we do have good data, so that helps. So we can kind of make some assumptions based on either how the company is using the product or based on some information we have about them that they've told us in the product. So that helps us kind of do some segmentation and something that's more personalized than it would be if we just sent everybody the same message. But we're also kind of doing a self-selection type technique where we'll do, like, for example, these virtual meetups, we'll pick topics and we'll let people self-select into those topics. So that's a good way of kind of, we don't know who this is of interest to, but if we put it out there, then people can self-select their way in, and then we can deliver some specific messaging within that particular event or that particular discussion that's more relevant to that group of people. So, yes, you're right. You can't have one-to-one conversations if you've got thousands of customers. So you need to think about these one-to-many things, but where you can use data and techniques like I just described to make it a little bit more personalized, so they at least feel the information they're getting is relevant.
Cool. And if I can just chime in with one tip, okay? And while configuring data and all of that stuff has its benefits, but it's also a lot of effort. So here is one thing that you can do, and this is a trick that I've learned from Nilesh. You probably have seen on his emails, and picking up on the same theme of what James was mentioning, being vulnerable. So one of his closing lines is that, hey, while this email is automated, I'm a real human on the other hand. The response, if you will hit reply, it will come to me directly and I will respond to it. And I think accepting that this is an automated drafted email is asking the right questions, but I'm a real human on the other hand, and I will read it and I will respond back. Embracing and being vulnerable, like James mentioned, while trying to show the human side that as you go. And that is one line that you can probably add in like 5 minutes.
Yeah, love it.
So yeah,
I thought Nilesh was actually completely automated, so it's good to know he actually is human as well.
Yeah, I know. The tech is advanced to that level. Yes,
he's a bot. He's a virtual bot. Right.
He's code.
Awesome.
Yeah, cool. And we'll do another webinar on how Nilesh probably automates the responses. Okay, but that's for another day. Cool. Thank you so much, James. Nilesh, I think we are already 9 minutes over. I think it was a wonderful conversation. We touched upon points that we I think we all wanted to learn about from each other. The next webinar is the last one in the series, and we are actually doing the do's and don'ts in that. And frankly, if you ask me, we've spoken about so many do's in the past, last two and this one today as well. In the last webinar, I think we're going to talk about in how many ways we can do things wrong, small mistakes if you don't care of them, and like James absolutely pointed out, right? Every mistake is going to get amplified 100 times in multiple ways, and so that webinar same time next week is going to be the last webinar is in this 4-part series. So do join us, and we're going to talk about do's and don'ts and more focus on don'ts so that we can avoid making those mistakes. Thank you so much, James, and thank you so much, Nilesh, for making this happen. All of you have a good evening, good day, and from wherever you're joining. Enjoy the weekend.